I am the middle of three boys of parents who were devout and active in the Presbyterian Church. My grandparents were Presbyterian, and so I never remember a time when I didn't know the church, know God, and love the church. So that's one thing about me from long ago. I have, my wife Sally and I have been married for 13 years. It's my second marriage, and I have two children, Mary Beth and Hannah, by a previous marriage. I have served churches, first in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, served a church in Wilmington, North Carolina, and then I served a church in Troon, Scotland. I received grace, love beyond my deserving. I've received it all my life, but most particularly in the failure in my ministry, my moral failure. And I remember the day that the Presbytery of Milwaukee welcomed me as a candidate into the Presbytery, and I told my story in front of the Presbytery. I laid it out. And because I had been determined after living falsely to live honestly, and I've always wanted to do that. I've tried to do that since those days. And to have the Presbytery hear my story and then to vote to welcome me, and not only me, but my wife Sally. I'll never forget the day at Emmanuel that the doors opened in the back and we walked in and the Presbytery applauded. And I've never experienced purer grace from the community of faith than that day. It was still a moving thing to me. Living out faithfulness to Christ in a very broken world, and living it out in a way that the world is drawn to say, see how these people love one another. And that is my passion now, to try to help shape a community of faith that is close to Christ, close to Christ's love and his understanding of the world, and determined to be obedient to Christ and living out that life. And so that's my great passion. It took an experience I had at a very fundamentalist camp when I was a teenager to bring me to the sense of a relationship with God in a powerful way. Something that I subsequently grew beyond, but am grateful for. And it was really when I was there at that camp that I heard God calling in a significant way in my life. I went to college thinking, majoring in economics. I thought I would go on into business, but I had an opportunity to work in a Methodist church while I was a college student, and I fell in love with work in the church. It would have been difficult, I think, to come to seminary without a deep faith. And seminary wasn't the kind of place that you would go to find faith, I don't think. At least it wasn't for me and for my classmates. Maybe it's different now. But I came, with a faith that was deeply challenged and changed. I didn't emerge the same person. And I'm grateful for that. And I think one of the reasons I'm Presbyterian is that I do believe in the importance of worshiping God with the mind. I was privileged to study under John Leaf, who was a crusty, curmudgeonly theology professor, and just a fearsome specter. In fact, the first time we had a small group session in theology, and we were sitting around a table. We were supposed to have read H. Richard Niebuhr's The Meaning of Revelation, and we were supposed to talk about it in the discussion group. And so we gathered in this room around a big oak table, and one of the students in the class named Pat Garrity immediately started out waxing eloquent about faith and her philosophy and what she thought about this and what she thought about that. And he sat at the end of the table and just listened. And finally she talked herself out, and he just was silent. Nobody said anything. He just looked at her. And finally he said, "Mrs. Garrity, I don't care what you think. I want to know what H. Richard Niebuhr thinks." So that's the kind of figure that he was. And yet I came to love him, and because I realized he loved the church, and he was a pastor at heart. He had been a pastor before, and not only was he a pastor, he was a pastor in ways that were difficult and costly in the South in the time when he came through. He was a great advocate of equality, anti-segregation, and was disinvited from Columbia Seminary for being theology professor because of his social stance. So he became curmudgeonly, but only in a loving sort of way. And I had an opportunity to study with him and in small group settings in his home, and that was a wonderful thing. I see a world that is increasingly self-centered, self-focused, device-focused, and I think the challenge of the church is to share a faith in a living, risen Christ that we don't see, but who we know and love, to share that faith in a way that helps us to reach out to other people in their variety of needs and troubles, and encourages other people to do the same. And to me, that's the great struggle of faith. Not in this time when faith seems under assault, not to circle the wagons and to hunker down and to say we can have our little enclave here, but to share a faith in a Christ who was who leads us to other people. I do love God deeply and genuinely and passionately, and I love to be with people who love Him. I love to try to share that love with people who don't know Him and love Him. And I hope what I bring now is a sense of genuineness, not of self-confidence, but of confidence in a great truth that's shaped my life.